Hello there, Year 10. We're going to talk about feelings. Oh yes. So, starters for 10. This is a little heading for you if you can write feelings. What I'd like you to do is get in the habit of making notes as we go along. And you can pause the video at the times that I prompt you to so that you can make notes. Or you can watch the video all the way through and then go back and make notes. Or you can try and do the work after you've seen the live lesson as well, or not use the video at all. That is your option. But whatever happens, you're going to need a pen and a bit of paper anyway. So feelings. I'd like you to draw a little mind map or bullet point, some responses to these prompt questions on the screen there. If we're talking about feelings, what are feelings? Can feelings be positive or negative? What are the different feelings that people may have? What triggers, so what causes those feelings? And how do we express feelings? Or how do we know what someone else is feeling? So just pause the video there to make a few jottings on your ideas about responses to those questions on the screen there. Okay, our learning journey today is to look at how do writers capture feelings. And we're going to look at how writers capture feelings, and it might be their own feelings, it might be the feelings of a character they've created, and how the feelings that they're writing about can evoke and create feelings for the reader themselves. And there's four main parts to this. We're going to look at what do we understand by feelings, and we've already started our work on that. We're going to study an account from a Titanic survivor. We're going to look at how is language and structure used to evoke feeling in the reader. And I'm going to introduce you to the what, how and why method of studying a text. So we were looking at those prompts there, and what are feelings? Feelings are a chemical reaction, an emotional reaction, and a response to something. We can have positive and negative feelings. The different feelings we have are sadness, happiness. Feelings and emotions are very much the same thing. What triggers feelings? It could be an event, a situation that's happened, bumping into someone you haven't seen for a long time, a smell, a memory, something in your control or something out of your control. How do we express feelings? It could be by facial expressions, it could be by the way that we are using our body language, it could be what we're saying, it could be how we're saying it. And how do we know what someone is feeling? Sometimes we don't know because they hide it, but simple visual clues like a smile, for example, is recognised usually of someone being quite happy, so we can read body language and tone of voice and words used to indicate what someone is feeling. Now, the little emoji box there are showing some of the different emotions that people might express on their face to show how they are feeling. And there's all the obvious ones there: happy, embarrassed, scared, nervous, goofy, surprised, quiet, annoyed, cool, sad, tired, excited, bored. That one should be changed to COVID, frustrated, angry, funny, proud. Nothing new there. Now, feelings are abstract nouns. The names of the feelings, because it's a name, it's a noun. And because you can't physically see it, it's not a concrete, you can't necessarily, you can see someone's facial expression, which portrays their feelings. It's an abstract noun. Those feelings, those emotions are abstract nouns. And this little icon here, to do with heart, is to do with feelings and emotions. Now, feelings are often personal and subjective. The way you feel about a certain song is personal to you, And there might be reasons why you have very fond memories of a song, because it might remind you of a really great time you had with someone dancing or at a party when that song was on. The contrast might happen. Someone might have had a bad experience while that song was on, so that song evokes negative feelings. But feelings are usually quite subjective and personal, and that little icon there means thoughts, as in it's internalised, it's someone's personal idea. Now, if we're talking about feelings, that process is quite reflective. So you are able to internalise and look at what is happening within yourself, reflect on what feelings you are having at that moment in time. And if you are writing about your feelings, you're being quite reflective about your personal thoughts and personal emotions about something. Maybe you're reflecting on someone else's feelings and emotions that they've shown towards you. But feelings tend to involve some type of reflection to an event. And they can sometimes be triggered. Again, a past event might have happened, or there is a memory that has come up. So this little icon here means time adverbial. It's just to do with time. Sometimes feelings have a time factor. There is a natural event that has caused something out of your control, so it's happening right now, and that affects the overall tone of the piece. Immediacy, panic, fearfulness. If it's, volcano erupting, they can see the lava spewing out the top and all the feelings of panic and worry and concern. And depending on who's writing about them, it might be a sense of immediate danger, or if it's someone reflecting about that past event of seeing a volcano erupt, it will be in the past tense. So just this time adverbial is just to say keep an eye on time. But we're focusing today on emotive language and the subjectiveness of writing about feelings. Now, that icon, this box of icons here, how are you feeling? If you talk about a text, if you've read a text and a character is expressing a feeling or the author is creating a feeling, you will naturally say one of these because they are quite common and at the tip of your tongue. Happy, sad, tired, excited, anxious. They are quite common phrases to use when describing feelings. And we're trying to encourage you to just explore feelings beyond this level of emoji. We're just trying to upgrade your thoughts and feelings about discussing feelings. Now, here is a wheel full of synonyms to do with feelings. So if we were going to look at happy, because we've got that happy emoji there, happiness could be caused and make people feel quite playful or content. They're happy because they're interested or proud, or they feel accepted. Maybe they feel powerful or peaceful or trusting or optimistic. Depends on who that character is or who the person is and what it is that's making them happy as to which one of these things it would be. But then we've got another layer here of reasons why it's causing them to feel happy. And I want us to try, Year 10, to get in the habit of looking beyond this central wheel of words when we're describing feelings, and just go on to the next couple of layers, because it shows you've really thought carefully about feelings in detail that the author is trying to evoke. Okay? So, we're going to look at an extract, which is a text, which is an eyewitness survivor's account of the Titanic, of the moment it went down and the moment that they realised that they were going to live, that the Titanic has sank and they have survived. So the Titanic, if you can write a little subheading here, what do you already know about the Titanic? And I want you to pause and think about these questions. What do you already know about the Titanic, and how do you know this? So these information nuggets and facts and opinions that you have on the Titanic, how have you got this information? Is it through reports that you've read? Is it through facts that you have seen? Objective report writing? Is it purely through what you studied and your teachers have told you through an inspector course? Was it through history lessons? Have you read a diary entry or a survivor's account of the Titanic? But what do you already know? Now, you might know a lot, you might not know so much, but depending on the type of information you've been exposed to might affect your reaction and thoughts and feelings to the Titanic. Now, the Titanic has been written about in reports because it was a huge maritime disaster. It was in the national press. And to quote Mr. Burling, it is unsinkable, absolutely unsinkable. So it was failed engineering, not really failed engineering, but it failed to deliver what it said it was going to do. So it was of great interest. So there's lots of reports that were generated about it, which had facts included in it that would have been objective, to do with the mariners and the Navy, and everyone that was involved in the rescue mission would have written about the Titanic quite a lot. But also there were lots of diaries that were found and have been discovered where people have recounted their emotive and personal experience of the event. And also, with diary writing, it's encouraged when there is a political or social historic moment, because it helps us get a better view on what was happening in society at the time. And that's why we encourage you to journal and diary write during your time going through lockdown and COVID-19. This itself is history. Anyway, here is the extract that we are going to read. Now, you know that the Titanic was known as a disaster. People have died. It was an awful event. So we already know that this isn't going to have a happy ending, that this is going to have a negative tone to the writing, a very sad tone to the writing. When it comes to seeing text for the first time, you can think about what you already know about a particular topic and see if it actually matches your preconceptions. Okay. Now only pale faces, each form strapped about with those white bars. So gruesome a scene. We passed on, the awful goodbyes, the quiet look of hope in the brave men's eyes as their wives were put into the lifeboats. Nothing escaped one at this fearful moment. We left from the sun deck 75 feet above the water. Mr. Case and Mr. Roebling, brave American men, saw us to the lifeboat, made no effort to save themselves, but stepped back on deck. Later, they went to an honoured grave. Our lifeboat, with 36 in it, began lowering it to the sea. This was done amid the greatest confusion. Rough seamen all giving different orders, no officer aboard. As only one side of the ropes worked, the lifeboat at one time was in such a position that it seemed we must capsize in mid-air. At last, the ropes worked together, and we drew nearer and nearer the black, oily water. The first touch of our lifeboat on that black sea came to me as a last goodbye to life, and so we put off, a tiny boat on a great sea, rowed away from what had been a safe home for 5 days. Now, we're going to ask some questions about this text and discuss it together. and I would encourage you to make notes as you go along because it will help you in your final task at the end of this lesson. So, who is the author of this writing, and what type of writing is it, and how do you know? Now, I've already told you. I told you it was a survivor's recount, recount writing. They're recalling the event of witnessing the moment the Titanic went down. Now, how do we know this? Well, looking at the use of personal pronouns and the fact that it is in the first person, we know that it is a personal piece of reflective writing. We passed on, we left the sun deck, saw us, our lifeboat. We must, we drew, we put off. So it is personal writing written in the first person and in the past tense, so it's recalling what happened. Now, not like Boris Johnson, the author isn't writing this as an persuasive text. So they are not repeating we deliberately as direct address to make the audience feel included. They are reflecting on the we as in the number of them, more than one, plural is the word I was looking for, people that are involved in this event. Okay, so there's one piece of evidence that proves to us it is a recount piece of writing. Oh look, there's my answers. A survivor of the Titanic, first person, we are, past tense, recount. Now recount can be personal, but it will have facts in it, and it will also have opinions and feelings throughout as well. We know the Titanic actually sank because there's been people that wrote factual reports on it, so we can always back that up. Now, we're going to look at the balance of opinions and facts in this piece. And you can see I have just colour-coded in blue opinions that are most prominent. So gruesome a scene. So their personal opinion was that the scene before them of all these people drowning was gruesome. Now the reader is probably going to agree that seeing thousands of people drowning is quite gruesome. If you agree with a writer's opinion, doesn't mean it's a fact. Now be careful, because sometimes writers will write an opinion and disguise it as a fact. So just watch out for, even though you agree it's probably a very gruesome scene, it's still an opinion. Okay? The awful goodbyes. Awful, again, is their opinion. We agree it probably was awful. It's still an opinion. Brave men's eyes, so the men were putting the wives and children on the boats first. Fearful moment. Greatest confusion and the rough seaman. I'm hoping some of you can remember what kind of word greatest was. I'm hoping some of you have muttered superlative under your breath, and superlative is a comparative adjective. They tend to finish with est, so it's comparing. They're not just in great confusion, they're in the greatest confusion. So it is a comparative adjective, a superlative, which emphasises they weren't just confused, they were greatly confused. So there's lots of opinions in that piece, but there's actually more facts than opinions. And there I have highlighted all of the facts in a sort of orangey, brown, coppery colour there. Each form strapped, so they were strapped in white bars. They actually passed on. Wives were put in lifeboats. They left from the sun deck. All of these things could be proved through corroboration of things. So we've got a lot more facts there than opinions. So although there are more facts, the overall tone of the piece feels more emotive. Why do you think that is? And I want you to just have a think about that for one moment. Why, when there are far more facts to opinions, that overall the tone of the piece feels emotive? Now, there's lots of reasons why. We already know as a reader that this is a disaster and that lives were lost. So we have contextual knowledge of the event that it was sad. Also, vivid emotive language is used to emphasize the heightened emotions of the event. So although not many emotive words are used, they are so vivid and strong that they create the tone of emotion, which is then not counteracted, it's not challenged at all. And there in the red, and it will be in bold for those of you that are colourblind, is the emotive language. And it's not a coincidence, is it, that the emotion, the emotive language, is also the opinions as well, because it's their personal feelings. Gruesome, awful, they're both very negative. But we've got two positive ones here, hope and brave. And that's contrasting those brave men that put their wives on those boats in that hope, the quiet hope, that they would survive. And it is contrasting those positive feelings of hope and bravery to that gruesome, awful, fearful moment that they were in. And it helps be amplified, the bravery of those men, because they went on to an honoured grave. Now, honour can be described as a feeling. I feel honoured. I've highlighted that as an emotion, although it could mean it literally was an honoured grave, as in their bravery was marked by some kind of medal. But if you look at there is positive and negative emotions in there. The hope, the quiet hope, and the bravery of those men actually overall is still quite a sadness to it, because they've done that bravery to save their wives. They've sacrificed themselves. Now, also, just have a look at the number of emotive words that are used in the first paragraph to the second paragraph. There are many more emotive words in that first paragraph. And it's because the events, the content, the what, the action in that first paragraph is the boat actually sinking and people making those decisions and choices of who is getting on the lifeboats. Because it wasn't so much the fact that the Titanic sank, it's because of the arrogance of the people who were designing the Titanic in its inability to think that there weren't enough lifeboats on board if they were needed. And that's why it's quite important that it's the fact that they're talking about the lifeboats here. So that, if we were talking about how is emotive language being used here, we've got the contrast of the hope and the bravery versus the gruesome and the awful. But there's more emotive language in the first paragraph, because that is about the moment those difficult, heart-wrenching decisions were made. And that second paragraph is more than dealing with the actual action of getting on the lifeboat. And it's much more factual there. Although there is some confusion, it's very much the decision's been made as to who's getting on the lifeboat. They are then just cracking on. Okay. Sentence structure is something that you sometimes feel brave talking about and are sometimes asked to talk about. And this little icon here that almost looks like the meh emoji, it's meant to be a sentence structure. And we're looking there in that sort of orangey colour at the short sentences. Thinking about what you notice about the use of emotive language there, look at the use of sentence structure here. So gruesome a scene, we passed on, the awful goodbyes, later they went to an honoured grave. Short sentences are used more frequently in that first paragraph. Why? Why are there more shorter sentences in that first paragraph than in that second? And again, it's to do with the pace and the franticness of the action that was happening in that first paragraph. People are hunting around, looking, observing in that awful scene. The second paragraph is more than dealing with the actual boat itself and being out on sea. Now, when we look at sentence structures, many of you will go, oh, simple sentences have been used, or a compound sentence has been used, or a complex or compound complex. They're the 4 sentence structures that you often think about. These aren't the ones that I'm wanting to revise and talk through with you today. I'm actually wanting you to look at these 4 types of sentence. Declarative sentences, which is merely a sentence that involves a statement. And it doesn't mean a statement as in a big controversial statement. It just means everyday things like, I am sitting on a chair right now. You have interrogative sentences, which are sentences that involve a question. And people who use lots of interrogative sentences could be like teachers or police officers or people who are grilling or wanting to know lots of information about someone. Or if someone's asking lots of questions, it could be they're trying to persuade somebody, rhetorical questions to think or feel about a certain thing. Or it might be showing confusion. Hey, what? What's going on? Some of you are probably asking those sorts of questions right now. But I would like you to pause and start making notes of these 4 types of sentence. Declarative sentence we're going to look at specifically today. Interrogative sentences we're not looking at today, but then when lots of questions are being asked. Your imperative sentences are those command sentences, the ones with those imperative verbs in, the bossy verbs. Sit down, shut up, listen. I'm sure you're used to hearing those at school. And exclamative sentences are those that use exclamation marks. They're exclaiming something. Different types of sentences are used for different types of effect, and they create different types of effect. So can you please make sure you have written down those 4 different types of sentences, and we are focusing on the declarative sentence today. Okay. Now, in this extract, we have got a combination of short, simple sentences, but the entire account is made up of the bulk of declarative sentences. Now only pale faces, each form strapped about with those white bars. So gruesome a scene. We passed on. The awful goodbyes. The quiet look of hope in the brave. They're just statements. And the effect of that is it creates a matter-of-fact tone, a sort of realisation to the events. It's quite, but although it's emotive, it's not too frantic. It's almost as if they are resolute. Once those decisions have been made and those that are getting on the lifeboats are on and those that aren't, they're just getting on with it. The short, simple sentences, again, I've talked about create a sense of panic at the start of the account. But if you look at the bottom, there is the use of hyphen to separate that subclause there, tiny boat. And so we put off, dash, hyphen, a tiny boat on a great sea, dash, rowed away from what had been a safe home for 5 days. Now, if you notice that hyphens have been used, and you say, oh, hyphens have been used in the declarative sentence. Why? I feel that they've been used because it separates that tiny boat away from everything else, like they are feeling separated from those that have gone down, and that the writer themselves may feel separated from, everybody that they may have lost and loved on that Titanic. Okay, so what is the purpose of the writing? I'm going back and recapping on what we said earlier. This is to have an eyewitness account of what occurred. It's helped with history. People were asked to journal and write diaries in the war to help map out history. And that is why writing diaries in key social and political events help build up a picture of society, but it also can help with your own processing of events. And that's why sometimes with these eyewitness and personal accounts, you have emotions and sometimes rhetorical questions when they're thinking and processing of what's going on. So this eyewitness may have been asked to write it or they've simply written it for their own reflections. We don't know. But we've looked at the what and we've looked at the how, and you can start to think about why have they written it. You can decide what you think the purpose of the writing was for. Now, we were looking at feelings and what feelings are being created or written about in that piece. Now, I feel that they were quite fearful in that writing, and I think when they talk about themselves feeling quite scared, it's because they're helpless. They're helpless to help anybody else. The situation has happened out of their control, so they are feeling fearful and scared, but because they are helpless. You may think they were feeling sad, and that's okay. But why are they feeling sad? Is it because they're vulnerable? And if it is because they're vulnerable, because they're powerless to do anything about it, I just need you, when you are going to start writing your response to this question, thinking about this wheel here. If you think they're feeling bad, is it really bad? Bad could mean bored or busy or stressed or tired. Just think carefully about which feeling you think they have had based on those synonyms that are on the wheel there. Okay, this is your main written outcome of this lesson. So you'll have some notes and you're going to answer the questions, the what, how and why questions 1, 2 and 3 based on this extract here. Okay, now if you are not feeling particularly brave at this, you might want to just do a what, how and why based on one detail that you found. I think the majority of you can do it on at least 3 quotations that you have found. But I've also got a stretch and challenge task for those of you that are super duper at this and want to be stretched further. So I'm going to leave you to self-regulate, because I know you're busy and I know you've been in school, and I want you to take ownership of your own learning, whether you do this about 1 point that you've identified in the text, or 2 or 3 or more, and or the additional challenge task. Okay, so how does the author use language here to convey her feelings about this event? So you're going to choose what it is you're going to write about. What is the point that the writer's trying to make? How do you know that that's the point they're trying to make? How has language been used to convey that idea, or how has structure been used to convey that idea? And then the why. Why has the author done this? What do you think they want the readers to think or feel or understand? So they may have been asked to write this, but what were the feelings that they were wanting the reader to have at the end of the piece? So some of the things you can see that I've put in bold, that I've identified, is gruesome, awful, fearful, grave, confusion, because they are the emotive words that we identified. So I'm going to say, I'm definitely going to talk about emotive language because it's an emotive event. They had a lot of feelings in that, and they have successfully conveyed those feelings by using those very strong emotive words. Gruesome's quite gory. Remember our lesson last week about connotations? No, it's the week before. The connotations were gruesome. You think of just gore and blood and death and nastiness. It was a gruesome event. And the fact that it's in that short sentence means it's as abrupt as the actual scene itself probably was. I then might talk about the balance of facts and declarative sentences to make it seem like they're resolved or they're helpless to change anything. But I'm also going to write about the use of hyphen, the sentence structure, the way that the tiny boat on a great sea is separated off from the sentence, the way that little boat was separated off from the people that didn't survive and the Titanic itself going down. So, what is the point trying to make? So I'm saying they're scared and helpless at the awful event, and that's where you can use that wheel there. What is the purpose of the writing? How are they feeling? You might say disgusted. I don't think that's the best choice. I don't think they are disgusted. I think sad is probably your best rate, or fearful. They were frightened. How do I know that? When emotive language is used. And again, the balance of facts and declarative sentences. And why? I think they've written it to help us understand the difficult plight of the survivors, but also to emphasise their own thoughts and feelings. And it was an emotive intent. I think they wanted us to understand how difficult that situation was, even though they survived it. So off you go, Year 10. Those of you that know you're not going to do the challenge task, I want you to write that out, please. It shouldn't take you any longer than 10 minutes. But for those of you that are wanting a bit of a stretch and a challenge, you can do another eyewitness account, but at this time it's of a prison hanging. And it's how does the author use language here to convey Marwood, the executioner's feelings towards the death penalty. So what feelings towards the death penalty, which is Marwood, who is the executioner, what are their feelings towards the death penalty? That's your stretch and challenge task. That is optional, but that's your essential task there, Year 10. And you can submit that to your teacher today. Okay, so just answer those 3 questions there. How does the author use language to convey her feelings about the event? And make sure that you comment on the emotive language and the structure of the text. Thank you very much for listening so patiently. And I might be seeing some of you in the live lesson later. Take care.